A poor elderly woman is rejected from first class. Then, the pilot makes a life-changing announcement. The airport encounter. Have you ever witnessed a moment where a single act of kindness came back in the most unexpected way? This story might just stay with you long after the screen fades to black. And if it moves you, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear your story too. The airport was alive with a constant hum. The sound of rolling suitcases, last-minute announcements, and travelers rushing from one gate to another. Hidden among the crowd was Evelyn Harris, a frail woman in her late 70s, with a faded coat wrapped tightly around her and a soft scarf covering her silver hair. In her hands was a boarding pass, worn at the edges from being held too tightly. She approached the gate agent, a young woman with bright lipstick and tired eyes. "Excuse me, ma'am," Evelyn said gently. "I believe I was told I'd be in first class." The agent sighed, typing rapidly. "Your ticket says economy, ma'am. If there was an upgrade, it would show here." Evelyn's eyes dropped. She wasn't trying to be difficult. She wasn't demanding anything, just hopeful that what she was promised would hold true. A man in a tailored business suit standing nearby scoffed. "Come on, lady. First class isn't charity. We all paid for our seats. You don't just walk up and ask." Passengers around glanced over, some with judgment, some with discomfort. A man adjusted his Bluetooth headset, casting a sideways glance. A woman, clutching her designer tote, sighed audibly. A teenager took out her phone, as if to document the awkward moment, then thought better of it. Others just turned away, suddenly engrossed in gate announcements or the latest headlines on their screens. "I understand," Evelyn whispered, clutching her old purse a little tighter. The long walk to economy. Without another word, she walked toward the gate and made her way down the jet bridge. Her steps were slow, deliberate, almost hesitant, as though each one carried not only her tired frame, but also the weight of 100 small disappointments she had long learned to carry in silence. Her feet, encased in worn-out shoes, brushed against the industrial carpet as she moved forward, each shuffle echoing like a quiet song of endurance. The cold hum of the tunnel echoed around her, blending with the muffled sound of boarding announcements and the laughter of families hurrying past. The sound of a child giggling, a suitcase rattling, and a final boarding call formed a chorus that felt strangely distant. She passed a young couple, taking a selfie, one of them holding a Starbucks cup, and the other adjusting airline-branded headphones for the perfect angle. Nearby, a man paced while arguing on his phone, clearly frustrated with a delayed connection. A woman rocked a crying infant gently, a diaper bag at her feet and a toy dangling from her wrist. Each was immersed in their own world, unaware of the quiet figure moving among them. No one noticed her. She had grown used to being unseen, moving like a shadow through busy places. There was something sacred in her stillness, something forgotten in the rush of modern life. Her fingers clutched the boarding pass tightly, not out of fear of losing it, but as a silent reminder that she too had a place on this flight, a space in this world. Each step forward wasn't just about reaching a seat. It was a quiet defiance against the invisibility that often cloaks the elderly. And so she walked, shoulders slightly hunched, but with a heart that had carried burdens heavier than any luggage on board. Once on the plane, Evelyn paused for a moment, trying to catch her breath before making her way down the narrow aisle. People avoided eye contact as she passed, more focused on overhead bin space and securing their spots. She finally reached her seat in economy middle row, back section, squeezed between two strangers who didn't even look up from their phones. She gently lowered herself into the seat, wincing slightly as her knees bent. Her thin fingers clutched her old purse, placing it in her lap as if it were the last piece of home she carried with her. She adjusted her scarf with care and glanced out the tiny window, the grey tarmac stretching beyond. Despite the discomfort, despite the lack of space and the distant stares, Evelyn managed a faint, dignified smile. She didn't complain. She never did. Because in her heart, she carried something more valuable than luxury, a quiet strength built on years of grace, humility, and kindness. She had once spent an entire winter living alone in a run-down apartment with no heat, working double shifts at a diner just to afford her rent and medication. She had endured loss, survived hardship, and sacrificed her comfort for others more times than she could count. But through it all, she had held on to her belief that kindness mattered, that it was the one thing no hardship could take from her. The captain's announcement, moments later, just as passengers were settling into their routines, adjusting seatbelts, reaching for headphones, preparing for the hours ahead, the cabin lights flickered gently, casting a soft, momentary glow over the rows of seats. The hum of conversations blended with the rustle of newspapers and the beep of devices connecting to in-flight Wi-Fi. A child's voice rang out briefly, followed by a parent's gentle hush. It was the kind of quiet chaos that marked the final moments before takeoff. Then, slicing through it all, came the familiar but always attention-grabbing crackle of the intercom springing to life. A low buzz of anticipation passed through the passengers as they looked up, instinctively pausing what they were doing. Something was about to happen. A voice, composed and authoritative, prepared to deliver what most expected would be the standard flight greeting, but this announcement would be anything but ordinary. "Ladies and gentlemen," came a calm, composed voice, "this is your captain speaking. Before we prepare for takeoff, there has been a small change in our seating arrangement." At first, passengers paid little attention. A few heads lifted. A couple of murmurs floated through the air. But then the next words pierced the cabin and brought everything to a halt. "Would Ms. Evelyn Harris please make her way to the front of the plane?" A stunned silence rippled through the rows like a breeze through a still field. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Seatbelt buckles stopped clicking. Even the background hum of the plane seemed to hush for a moment. Evelyn sat completely still, her hands resting in her lap, uncertain if she had heard correctly. Her name? Why would the captain be calling her? A few seconds later, a flight attendant appeared beside her, smiling gently. "Ms. Harris, please come with me." Passengers began exchanging curious glances. Whispers flickered like sparks across the cabin. The cockpit door clicked softly, drawing the attention of the nearby flight attendants, who briefly paused in their movements. One of them straightened, eyes widening slightly as the captain himself stepped out, his polished shoes tapping against the floor with deliberate calm. The cabin, already quiet, seemed to hold its breath as every pair of eyes turned toward the front, anticipating something far from ordinary. A man near the window leaned toward the aisle for a better look. The businessman, who had mocked her earlier, straightened in his seat, the confidence draining from his features as confusion settled in. Something unusual was unfolding, and for the first time on that flight, all eyes turned not toward the flight crew, not toward their phones or screens, but toward Evelyn Harris, the quiet woman in the worn coat who was about to step into a moment that would change everything. A surprise revelation. Evelyn stood slowly, gripping her purse with hands that trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of all the attention suddenly thrust upon her. As she walked past rows of staring passengers, she felt every eye on her. Each step forward felt surreal, as if she were stepping through a dream. Some passengers watched with curiosity, others with a spark of guilt creeping into their expressions. She reached the front of the plane, where the plush curtains separated the economy section from first class. A flight attendant greeted her warmly and drew back the curtain. Behind it lay a different world. Wide leather seats glistened under soft lighting, chilled drinks waited on polished trays, and warm towels rested beside elegantly folded blankets. The contrast with where she had been seated just moments ago could not have been more stark. And then the cockpit door clicked open. A tall man in full uniform stepped out with calm authority. He removed his cap slowly, revealing gentle eyes, filled with something more profound than politeness, something personal. He walked up to her and met her gaze. "Miss Harris," he said, his voice low but clear, resonating with sincerity. "I've waited many years to meet you." Evelyn blinked, clearly puzzled. "I'm sorry, do we know each other?" The man smiled, a soft, nostalgic smile that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside. "Not directly, but you knew my mother. Her name was Rachel Thomas." Gasps rippled down the cabin, followed by an uneasy hush. The businessman leaned in slightly, eyes widening. Someone near the front seat whispered, "Wait, what's happening?" Evelyn's lips parted slightly in astonishment, but no words came yet. She stood still, caught between confusion and dawning realization, as the story was just beginning to unfold before a captivated audience. A story from the past. "Years ago," he continued, his voice steady but filled with emotion, "she was homeless, alone, sitting on a bench in the rain. It was cold, and she was soaked through, trembling. She had nowhere to go and no one to call. Everyone passed her by, not out of cruelty, but indifference, as if she were invisible. Except you. You noticed. You stopped. You didn't just offer her food, you gave her kindness when the world had turned its back. You bought her a meal, found her a safe place to sleep, and you spoke to her like she mattered." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "You probably don't remember every detail," he added, "but to her it was everything. You told her she had value, that the dark times wouldn't last forever. You gave her hope, not just a warm meal or a dry place to sleep, but a reason to keep going." Evelyn's eyes widened in realization. "Rachel, the young girl in the red coat. I remember. She was shivering so badly I thought she might collapse. She looked so lost." The pilot nodded, his eyes glistening. "That girl was my mother. And because of you, she didn't give up. She went back to school, earned her degree, and became a nurse, part of a profession that gave her purpose and dignity. She worked long hours, healed strangers, and gave her all to ensure I had a better life than she did. She got her life back, one step at a time. And she raised me to believe in something I carry with me every single day, that kindness, even in its simplest form, is powerful, and that in America, where second chances are part of the dream, and lifting one another up defines our shared spirit, we must keep paying it forward. Because you didn't just help a woman, you helped shape a future, a legacy that continues with me, that we are all responsible for paying it forward." He knelt beside Evelyn, his voice soft but unwavering. "You gave her the strength to rebuild her life, and she made sure I knew where that strength came from. I've waited my entire life for this moment to say thank you." Tears welled in Evelyn's eyes, not just from the surprise or gratitude, but from the deep, overwhelming realization that a moment of compassion she once offered had echoed through generations. A heartfelt gesture. "Today, it's my turn to say thank you. For the rest of this flight, you are my honored guest." The captain's voice carried a quiet reverence, his words wrapping the cabin in a hush that spoke louder than any announcement before it. As he extended his hand to help Evelyn into a first-class seat, a subtle shift in the atmosphere followed. This was no mere gesture of comfort, it was a declaration of gratitude that reached beyond words. He helped her settle gently into the plush seat, adjusting the headrest for her with care. A stewardess offered her a warm towel and a glass of sparkling water, her expression filled with respect. For a brief moment, Evelyn hesitated, still unsure whether she was worthy of all this, but then she looked around and saw not pity, but admiration. The businessman, who had mocked her earlier, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He couldn't meet her eyes. Around him, other passengers began lowering their gazes as well, faces flushed with guilt, reflections stirring in their expressions. What had begun as judgment turned into quiet introspection. Evelyn turned to the cabin, smiling gently, her eyes soft but steady. "It's never too late to see people differently," she said, her voice warm and forgiving. A mother nearby hugged her child closer, her eyes glistening. "I want my son to grow up in a world with people like you," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. In that moment, it wasn't just Evelyn who had been elevated. The entire plane had risen to a higher kind of awareness, a shared understanding of humanity's deeper strength, the power of compassion, a changed atmosphere. By the end of the flight, the mood in the cabin had shifted entirely. What had begun as a quiet journey, filled with impatience and indifference, had transformed into a collective pause, an awakening of sorts. People who had barely acknowledged one another at the start were now exchanging glances, nods, even quiet smiles. The same businessman who had mocked her earlier could no longer ignore the weight of his misjudgment. With trembling hands, he scribbled a check to donate in Evelyn's name. Not for show, but from a place of genuine humility, a place that had been stirred awake by her quiet example. Children who had once fidgeted restlessly now looked toward Evelyn with wide, curious eyes. One small boy, clutching a coloring book in his lap, tore out a crayon drawing of a rainbow and shyly handed it to her as she passed. "This is for you," he said softly. The innocence in his gesture, so pure and unprompted, brought a new wave of emotion across the cabin. A teenage girl smiled and whispered to her mother, "She's like someone from a storybook." A young woman discreetly wiped away a tear. Flight attendants moved with more intention, their usual routine now imbued with warmth. And when the plane landed, something unexpected happened. Applause. It started slowly, one or two people clapping out of instinct or appreciation, but quickly spread throughout the entire cabin. Not because Evelyn had demanded respect or fought to prove her worth, but because she had earned it through compassion, through humility, through a strength so quiet it shouted without raising its voice. As Evelyn stepped off the plane and into the terminal, pilot's cap still in her hands, she was met not just with glances, but with reverence. Some nodded respectfully, others gently touched her shoulder as they passed. And through it all, Evelyn smiled. Kindness never truly disappears. It just waits for the right moment to return. And when it does, it returns multiplied. Reflections and lessons from the story. What is the core message of this story? This powerful story teaches us that no act of kindness is ever wasted. A small gesture made decades ago transformed not only one life, but an entire generation. Evelyn didn't give to be remembered, she gave because it was the right thing to do. And yet, life found a way to return that kindness when she least expected it. The story reminds us that compassion is a legacy. It echoes, it multiplies, and it can show up again when the world needs it most. Sometimes, a simple choice to care can ripple out into something profoundly beautiful. Life lessons we can all take away. Kindness is timeless. What Evelyn did was forgotten by the world, but never by the person she helped. We never truly know the impact we make. A warm meal and a bed for the night led to an entire life rebuilt, and a son who became a pilot committed to honoring goodness. Never judge a book by its cover. The businessman who initially scoffed at Evelyn later became one of the many moved by her character. Compassion creates community. By the end of the flight, a cabin full of strangers became a group connected by a single story of grace. What stood out most is how one quiet woman changed the atmosphere of an entire plane just by being herself. Her humility, resilience, and quiet strength were more powerful than any speech or display. It challenges us to be more attentive, more generous, and more aware of those who may go unnoticed. Her story also makes us ask, when was the last time we helped someone without expecting anything in return? Maybe today is a good day to start. If this story touched your heart like it did ours, don't just scroll away. We'd love to hear your story of kindness in the comments. Whether big or small, your experience could inspire someone else to act with love and generosity. And if you want more heartwarming, life-changing stories like this one, subscribe to our channel, Toch Story. We're building a community where storytelling uplifts, inspires, and reminds us of what really matters. Click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a moment that just might change your day or your life. Because in every quiet act of kindness, there's a story worth telling. Toch Story, stories that stay with you.